All right, we'll call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. May 9th, 4:36 p.m. Alder Galvin, Alder Hutchison, Alder Johnson are present. Alder Burnett is excused. We'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. Second.
We have a motion by Hutchison, a second by Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item D, approval of minutes of the April 25th, 2023 meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Galvin, second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item E, regular business number 1. Consideration with possible action in response to a request from the Finance Committee to inquire at the top 10 cities in the state, Wisconsin, and a couple of nearby municipalities to determine how frequently they do their revaluations, and if it's by ordinance, policy, or if they just do it. Also to inquire what the presumed cost might be for the city to do it on a more frequent basis. Staff, could you just give us an overview of what you found?
Sure, I will start, and then we'll turn it right over to the assessor. In your packet, there's a memo from our assessor, kind of summarizing what he found. There's a second page, is an Excel spreadsheet that kind of goes through some of the top municipalities, if they do it by state statute or by policy, and then it goes through and shows some of our local municipalities. And then there's also a copy of the revaluation policy that we currently have in place. So I will turn it over to the assessor, and you give them more of a summary of what information that you have pulled together, Russ. Oh, not hearing you.
Okay, it should
There we
hear me
go.
now?
Yep.
Okay. For the most part, larger communities are doing on a, roughly 5 to 6 year rotation. The largest communities, Milwaukee and Madison, do it annually, but their annual assessment will consist of just reviewing it from desktop. Mainly because of large size of community, number of parcels and the staff that they have. So I would consider it a true revaluation. I think the only community that does have an ordinance on it is Brookfield. They do theirs on a rotational basis also. So for the most part, communities our size and smaller are probably doing it on a 5-year basis like we had planned on doing. And it actually is up to the assessor when it does it, but they like to do a 5-year, a 5-year basis, mainly because you can keep up with the market a lot quicker than it is if you wait until the actual market turns, and then you're already a year behind because of using sales from the previous year to establish that current year's assessed values. So I think our policy that we have currently to do it on a 5-year basis, with the next one being in 2027, kind of addresses what we're looking for here. And the surrounding communities that are done mainly by one of the appraisal contract firms, other than I think 3 communities that do it on a 3-year basis, they're all rotating through on like a 4 or 5-year basis for their revaluations.
Okay. So right now, Russ, we're basically doing that right now, right? Where we do it when we want. Can you provide some insight into why we waited 17 years from now until the last one?
It wasn't my choice. At the time, I had asked previous people in administration if we could do a revaluation roughly, I think it was almost 10 years ago, just because to keep up with the new construction and making sure that everybody's paying their fair share. I mean, you want to have your basis up to date. So I was rebuffed at that time mainly because I think the people that were in charge were not happy with the media attention that was given to us at the time. I had a lot of scrutiny because it hadn't been done in a while prior to that. So I think there wasn't an appetite for it until recently, when it became obvious that the market was getting way on us and we had to do a revaluation. So not my choice. I actually would like to do it on a more regular basis. I think it's more reasonable for property owners to see the changes on a smaller basis if the market doesn't change a whole lot. In this case, it changed a whole lot, but I think even if we had done it on a 5-year basis, it would have been a huge difference. But you guys and me, I think 5 years gives us enough time to do our work in-house with the annual work, plus do a portion of the city, get ready for revaluation. So I like I said, I'd like to have done it a lot sooner than we had done it, but it wasn't in the cards, and it wasn't my call to make.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and there's a reason I asked the question, of course, is because even though it says on here that it's directed by the assessor or by statute, at least what I'm hearing from you is that it was maybe even a little bit more of a political decision than your direct decision, meaning that there's nothing in statute or even in local ordinance that says you have the unilateral authority to make that decision. It's still a political one, right?
Well, and it's political and it's budgetary. I think a lot of it's budgetary because it's not a cheap thing to do, obviously. Because the way we're doing it now, we're trying to spread it over a number of years so that the cost that's in there for that $200,000, that would be spread over the next 4 years with the revaluation after that. So had we done it, we were looking at before, we have done a lot of budgeting up front, the last revaluation, and spent a lot of it ahead of time. And then, we were lucky with the way the market went over the past, 15 years that it didn't have the big peak or the big valley. It kind of went up a little bit, went down a little bit, and we kind of stayed within compliance. But, with I can advise when we can do a revaluation, but it's up to you as the finance committee and the council to approve the funding to do so.
But did that ever, when you made that recommendation, did that recommendation ever make its way to council?
No.
Okay. So of course, the state statute dictates plus or minus 10%. That when you're talking about aggregate is one thing, but in a 17-year period, correct me if I'm wrong, but an individual house could fluctuate quite wildly, which is probably what has led to a lot of upset taxpayers who maybe are those individual circumstances whose properties appreciated quite a bit. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yes, that's correct. Over that period of time, not all properties appreciate at the same rate. Some people maintain their properties, other people let them go. Some properties become more valuable mainly because they're lower end of the spectrum and they're easily affordable for first-time home buyers or people that are looking to flip them and make a buck on them, or just find something that they weren't able to afford when the interest rates were higher.
Okay, and so if we did a revaluation more frequently, it would at least help with mitigating the impact for individual properties over a period of time.
Correct.
Yep, okay. I've got some additional thoughts on that, but Jim, did you have some things that,
It's on a different agenda item.
is that for Alder Weary though?
Yeah.
No, that's related to this.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay, well, there is a question as to Airbnb type homes. There's an assumption that they are assessed in the same manner as homes next to them that are not Airbnb, and there's an assumption that the homes next to them, their tax assessment is being raised because of that. Is that a true assumption?
Well, the result is the same. State law dictates that we look at what the sales are of properties to establish an assessed value, and in the absence of sales of the subject property, we have to look at sales of properties that are similar. And if the similar properties are next door, initially these properties aren't being used for Airbnbs, they're just homes that people are selling. And if the new buyer turns it into an Airbnb, that's their choice, but as long as it's not regulated or waived. But we have to look at what the initial sale is and compare that to how it existed at that time, and look at that in comparison to the other properties that haven't sold to come up with assessed value. To do otherwise would be against state law.
Right, so is there a way you know that it's an Airbnb when you do an assessment?
No, there isn't. Unless we have the Airbnbs listed and we review them, unless the property is totally different somehow, and when they take out permits to make improvements to these properties that are turning into Airbnbs, we pick that up. But the initial sale of the property, like I said, is more like the 60s rancher that hasn't had a lot of updates, and that's how they can get them more reasonably priced, and then they were turning around and turning into the Airbnbs with attached garages that had rooftop viewing areas, adding bedrooms in the basement and so on. But we picked those improvements up during the permitting process and add those for the next year. But that doesn't mitigate the sale that occurred previously, where you compare it to the other property. I mean, before those improvements were made, that's what the sale was.
Okay.
We're required to look at those sales and make a comparison. We don't have a choice. I mean, if there's a law that was made that, you know, Airbnbs can be assessed differently than owner-occupied homes, that'd be great. But right now, the only property that has the ability to have it assessed differently is agricultural property, and that's through the Constitution.
Okay. So there doesn't seem to be a need to look at the assessment, computer programs or anything. There's no box you check. If it's a low rent Airbnb type property, it's just going on market value of nearby homes.
Right, that's what we're required to do. We look at how the house exists, what the amenities are, and if there's been any improvements to the property since the sale. And then we take those into account when we adjust for other properties.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Alder Galvin, any questions? All right. Attorney Bunger, we passed this policy that said that we would do the revaluations every 5 years. As I put in the communication on this one, I asked really wanting to know what other places did. Did they do policy? Did they do ordinances? Did they just leave it open? Of course, we've got some different responses here, and I appreciate whoever pulled this all together. My question is on the policy side. What enforcement mechanism is there around that policy side? And so, for example, if we wanted, right now the policy says that we're going to do it at least every 5 years. Do we have to listen to the policy? How does that work, right? And so the reason I'm asking is because I want to know if we should have this as an ordinance versus a policy, because what I want to avoid is politicization of this.
Sure.
You know, if it needs to be done, should it be an ordinance?
Right, so it's a difficult question. I think the way that the policy is currently structured, it does provide for some flexibility because the driving factor with respect to doing a reval should be really market-based, not so much time-based. Obviously, the longer you go, in theory, there should be some fluctuations in the market that will support having a reval. But when you formulate it, and yes, with the policy, there is no, it's not cut in stone. Obviously, staff will always recommend following a policy, particularly a policy that's adopted by council. But is there any punishment or any kind of, enforcement mechanism if a policy isn't beyond exposure to liability? No. However, with respect to this type of process, in our research, we didn't see any community that had an ordinance, and I think for that reason is because if you do have a particular time frame set in stone, let's say it's 5 years like the policy sets forth, but you don't have funding or there hasn't been any market fluctuations, you are then forcing yourself into finding funding to pay for a reval that may result in very little to minute or minor insignificant changes in the valuation or the assessment levels of the home. So you're expending taxpayer money and not really getting any results. So it would be tricky to create an ordinance. My department's recommendation would be to not move forward with an ordinance, simply because it could put the city in a very difficult position.
So here's what I'm trying to avoid. Is somebody saying, no, we're not going to do that right now, and then we wait 17 years. And again, I understand the aggregate piece, but we had a lot of individual homeowners that were dramatically impacted by this. I mean, imagine seeing your property taxes doubled for some people. Some folks maybe even more. Like, how do we avoid that? How do we give a mechanism that says to our assessor that you know what, your recommendation is going straight to council for a
Right.
whole body to deliberate, not just one person. How do we do that?
I think perhaps beefing up the policy a little bit, and because I don't think the policy sets forth any kind of directive for the assessor to bring forward a plan, and then at least laying it in front of the governing body to decide whether they want to expend the funds, because ultimately it's still going to be up to council, whether because it's always going to be a budgetary consideration as to, setting forward an operational budget to be able to do a revale. Because that's an expense that's normally not, carried in the budget of the assessor from year to year.
Could we just refer the policy back to staff?
Sure.
For additional consideration? One of the
Yep.
things that I would love to see, I think, within that policy is that the assessor comes before the finance committee annually to make their recommendation.
Yep.
Here's
And
where
then-
we're at,
correct.
here's my recommendation.
Right, and I think that element is not in the policy, which we could add, and that would just be kind of a systematic process so that council is constantly being apprised and at least it's being brought forward to them for review and approval and discussion.
Would you be good with that, Russ?
Yes, I think it'd be great, and I think another thing that we perhaps add into there would be something that would mention the aggregate ratio. If within that 5-year period, we do see a big change, that we could maybe do it even sooner. Or in the opposite, if we don't see a big change, we could stretch it out farther. It's just some thoughts.
Yeah, so I think maybe having some things contained in that policy that says, here's the aggregate ratio, here's how much it's going to cost us to update it if you want to do it. It gives council, I think, more information and really a little bit more empowerment over preventing that type of past scenario from happening again. And I appreciate why you wouldn't want to bake it into ordinance. I do. But I think we need something that's a little tougher to make sure that council's looking at that every year.
Sure.
Okay.
Makes sense, I agree.
All right, I would move, I'll make the motion then that we refer the policy back to staff and have them bring it back. Can we say the next finance committee? Is that possible? Do you need a month, 2 months?
Possibly, if not next, then the one thereafter.
Okay.
So at most a month.
Okay, let's bring it back to finance committee with recommended changes to incorporate some of the recommendations that were made.
A second.
All right, so we've got a motion by Johnson, second by Hutchinson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, we are on to item number 2, consideration with possible action to approve the purchase of 26 APX 6000 mobile radios from Baycom for $126,455.42 for the police department. Any discussion?
A couple questions.
Go ahead, Alder Gilman.
For this bid, they're looking for bonding for the entire price, but there's a reference to a JAG grant from 2019 and a JAG grant from, I think, 2021. How much, it doesn't say how much money is coming from those grants, if any.
Actually, on the page right after the report, it talks about 74,000 coming from 2021 bonding and then 52,455.42 from 2022 bonding.
It-
What was your question?
Okay, it says Green Bay Police Department approved funds 2019 JAG grant, 2021 JAG grant, 2021 bonding, and 2022 bonding.
I think it might be on one of the other items, Alder Gilman.
This is the 26 price for,
Right, but there's multiple items for radios here, and I think the JAG grant was listed on a different one, like the actual amount. So I'm wondering if that sheet's a cover sheet for all of the acquisitions, do you know what I mean?
are you talking about this, right here, Brian?
Yeah, that one's, it is specific. It does say on the one letter, it says all 4 funding sources, and then on the second page, it only talks about 21 and 22 bonding.
There should be 3 different items that you have in front of you with 3 different funding schemes involving a combination of some of this historic unspent JAG grant money and some historic unspent bonding money.
And that's what it is. I have a question on that. When you refer to previous bonded years,
It's on the
was it
future.
already designated for this and we're grabbing it now?
Okay.
But it's on
Yeah,
the
this is,
agenda.
this should be to approve the expenditure of previous years of bonding for replacement radios.
I see. So this is just specifically, okay, we're gonna spend it now specifically for this. Okay.
Yeah, this is just we're asking for the authority to purchase these.
And the money's already there in bonding?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And I just pointed out to Alder Galvin, under agenda item 4, it does detail the amount from the JAG grants. One question that I had around this, is it customary, and I know this happens occasionally, but is it customary for us to hold on to bonded funds for that long?
Customary, no, that would prefer not to. We would typically, because it is an annual bond request for the radios, so the assumption or the recommendation would be to bond on an annual basis. I'm not sure if there was a reason why they were held for 2 years, if they were looking to buy, I don't know if it was a backlog or if there was they were trying to, put more money together. I'm not quite sure why we have 2 years worth of.
This, and I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here because some of this goes back way before I got here. We've made this observation that we've had lots of odds and ends of bond and previous year grant funding, that it seems to take us a long time to spend, and I can tell you that is an issue that we're dealing with in our department. We've changed the way we track when we get bonded funds given to us for something, how we track making those purchases, because the other problem that this causes is the price of these things goes up over time. I can't say for sure because I'm still not clear on why these took this long, if there was a backlog. I don't think so, all the way from 2019, and that was 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I think you're just going to be the guinea pig on this one, Chief, just
Yeah.
because we're obviously fielding a bond request that exceeds what our financial consultant is recommending, and then when we see something like that,
Right.
and you're not the only department, right, others have been in that position from time to time, so it just prompts us to ask the question.
And what I can tell you is, in our department, we have changed the process for keeping track of when we're given money to buy things, to make sure we are buying in that year where we were given the money, for all kinds of reasons, that we get more value for our money that way, we spend the money, we get the equipment that we need more timely. And so I would anticipate you would not see this from our department in the future.
Okay? Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
Motion by Hutchinson, a second by Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Consideration, number 3, consideration with possible action to report out the purchase of 3 APX 8000 mobile radios from Baycom for $22,965.30 for the police department. It's under the spending threshold. Is there a reason that we put this one on here?
From what I understand, because it was one large package and they were kind of bringing it together, they thought for transparency, they wanted to show you that there was, really, there was 3 more additional radios. These are larger, more expensive radios that are being brought through, or not more expensive, but another type of radio. So they're just being transparent that they brought more
Entertain a
radios.
motion to receive and place on file.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Galvin, second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 4, consideration with possible action to approve the purchase of 18 APX 6500 7-800 mobile radios from Baycom for $103,663.08 for the police department. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion by Hutchinson, a second by Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 5, consideration with possible action for approval to purchase 2 Mercury outboard motors for $39,904.76 for the police department. Any discussion? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 6, consideration with possible action to approve the purchase of 2 Stryker Power Load Cot Fastening Systems from Jefferson Fire and Safety for $63,594 for the fire department. Any questions?
No.
We have a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Hutchinson, a second by Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 7, consideration with possible action to approve the Press Times as the official newspaper of the City of Green Bay from June 2nd, 2023 to May 31st, 2024. Any questions?
None. Motion approved.
We
Second.
have a motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 8, consideration with possible action on the 2023 bonding request. Director Ellenbecker, you want to give us overview? Is
Sure.
Ayler's on the phone too or not?
They are not.
Okay.
They are not. So I did try to put a little bit of the background on the report page. In total, we're looking for a bonding request of just about $23,509,000. And with of that, $15,954,074 is really to be paid back by the general levy. At this point, we haven't determined the length of borrowing. That will be determined next phases, once we decide what is going to be approved for borrowing. Ellers had a recommendation of about $13 million from the general levy to keep the debt service mill rate the same from the annual budget. Since then, I did reach out to Ellers and verified, right now we're recommending $15,954,000. And if that was to be approved, we were trying to discuss, what kind of increase that would mean to the annual budget. And it would be about 6 cents, it would be about $318,000 annually in the debt service if we were to increase this, go from 13 million up to about 15.9. In this request, there's also 3 items that were originally in this request that have been removed with the assumption, with the request that they get approval to order them this year, knowing that they will not be delivered till 24 or 25. And that is a 70-foot aerial truck for $350,000. There is a request for the fire station alerting system for $950,000, and we were looking to spend, basically pay for half in 2023 and half in 2024. And then there's an ambulance med 471 for $341,000. That, again, because of long lead times, I would like to have approval to order them this year. But that would mean we would have to pay for them in a 24 or 25. That would be a total of $1,091,950. That is being requested as part of this package to not pay this year, but order. I went on to say is, I know that there's always a question about the state debt limit. At this point, out of the state debt limit for the city of Green Bay, we are at about 42% of what the state says you're allowed to borrow. That was in the confirmed number at the end of 2021 year end. We're still in the 2022 year end, but that projection is about 38% because it's a percentage of your equalized, as our equalized has changed. So we are not close to the state debt limit. Our internal policy says we're going to stay below the 50% limit. So again, we're both within the state limit and our internal policy, and then amount that we are borrowing. So I have included in your packet, there is a page and a half that shows you the items that we're requesting money for to borrow. Again, $15,954,000 from general levy, $135,000 for sanitary storm is looking at $3.9 million, parking $520,000, and TID 22 is looking for $3 million for a total of $23,509,000. There is a second page, another spreadsheet that's attached, and that is just to show you that is an additional $24 million worth of projects that are expected to also be completed in 2024, and those have other funding sources, whether it's special assessments, money from Brown County, state aid, ARPA, operating budget, some additional remaining fund balances, TID. So those projects are all expected to be completed, again, using money that have a different funding source besides borrowing. And I also included just where the city is at as a double A3 rating for Moody's, kind of to show you that anything in the double A is still considered to be highly, is still very strong. And some of the indicators where the city, has come out on it. So at this point, the department heads and the mayor have already gone through the list, and there were some things that we have removed for either reasons that they can't get completed in 2023, or we won't receive them in 2023, or, but this is what's in front of you is what is being requested to borrow for the 2023 bonding.
Thank you for that overview. Maybe I'll start with a couple high-level questions. You guys can jump in whenever you'd like to. When you lay out the, when you talk about the debt limits, and so the city policy is 50%, what is the state?
State says you have to be, the calculation says we could be up to, there's the calculation, right now we are running at about 42% of what the state allows as a limit. So we are not even, we could go up, we could double our outstanding obligations at this point.
Whoa.
So we are not even close to the state limit.
Okay.
We are only running at about 42% of what the state says you can borrow.
Okay, great. And then do you know, and I assume this might be hard to calculate without knowing the terms of the bonds and the notes that you take out, but do you know where we would be at the end of '23 with this approval?
For outstanding debt.
Yeah.
Typically, I wouldn't know the interest portion.
Right.
For a total outstanding principal, we are sitting at general obligation at 172. We are going to pay off about $9 million of general obligation. It's probably a little bit more. I could have that calculated.
Yeah, and I think it'll just help us to understand where we are. And if you don't have it now, I totally get it.
Actually, I will, on the back of the second page of the spreadsheet. In 2022, we are expecting to pay off $15 million worth of principal. And this would be adding about $24 million in outstanding debt. So if we're sitting at $172 million now, we'd be adding roughly $8 million. So it would go up $8 million. But I think there's a conversation that, as you say, well, we're only paying off 15 million, and now we're borrowing 22. But much of this that is being paid off was taken out 20 years ago. So if you're trying to have current values, we're paying out. We borrowed obviously 15 million 20 years ago, and now we're looking at 23. And the current value of money, there's an increase, but I didn't.
So I did get the calculation.
Oh, did
on that.
you?
Of course I did.
Present value.
Well, I did the general levy. One is what I
Yep.
paid attention to, which is we're paying off 8.5 million. And so assuming that was taken out 20 years ago, plug it into the CPI calculator, that would have today's value of 13.89 million. And so of course, the reason I did that is because Director Lebecker and I met yesterday talking about, I don't know if it was an actual policy or a practice, that we not take out any more debt than what we're paying off. And so of course, for that to be an apples to apples comparison, you have to look at what is the value of this when it was taken out. And so 13.89 is the number that came out.
Yeah, and again, just to jump in there, I think that was just a former administration that had that to try to bring the calculation down. And then second, I think since then there have been a lot of changes. Obviously, costs have gone up, but there also is a bigger demand, and I'm going to kind of speak, not for Steve, but I think there's a bigger demand for some of the infrastructure to be improved, maybe over the, like whether it's sidewalks and construction and resurfacing. There is a bigger need than maybe it was in the previous years.
So the Moody ratings right now is that. Now I know that grade is based on a number of things here. In a hypothetical scenario, if council approves the 16 million of levy-supported borrowing, and the 24 million obviously in total, will that have an impact on our bond rating at all?
I'm gonna say no. I don't have a calculation for it, and the reason why, because it's a factor of your operating revenues, and it's then divided by your full debt outstanding. So as both numbers go up, your ratio is going to be somewhat similar, And we are currently in a moderate range. We're not a strong or very strong, but we're moderate for the debt calculation. I don't think that's gonna change much, and none of the numbers have changed much, other than the full value, our tax base actually has jumped up, and that was already the strong assessment or indicator.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at, right? We're right now in that kind of that very strong category. If we were to get downgraded at all, we would go down to still strong, right? But it kind of shifts us into a different sphere there. And part of me is just wanting to understand, are we at risk of doing that? And if so, what that impact really means.
Well, like, at this point, I'm going to say we're not at risk, because there was about 2, if not 3 years where Moody was giving us a negative outlook. So they had given us warning that in most cases we were going to be dropping. So we were at a double A2, and then I think in about 2016, I think we dropped to a double A3, and that's because we had a negative outlook, and they'd warned us for years. So at this point, we are not, there's nothing pending that we have any kind of negative outlook on our current rating.
Okay. Just, the only other questions that I have left are related to some specific items, so are there, gentlemen, either of you have questions? Nope.
No.
No questions at all?
Well, it's a lot in here, and I know this is gonna be discussed on Tuesday, or is this,
Oh, you know it's gonna be discussed on Tuesday.
I guess, in terms of like ARPA, the funding sources, there's a spreadsheet that showed funding sources for 2023 projects.
Yes.
And I have a specific question on the Burgundy project, because that is scheduled to be worked on this year, but I don't see it on the spreadsheet.
What project?
It's an ARPA fund. It's a Burgundy stormwater project. Is there a reason why that isn't on the list, or is it?
Because we don't expect work to be completed on that project as part of the 23 capital program.
Okay.
I'm expecting that to be a 24 project.
Be completed.
Correct, there'll be design work, but I don't think we're gonna get to construction this year.
Oh, okay, well, that's news to me. Okay, I
Well,
understand.
just with how late we are in the year. Probability, by the time we get through design, go to bid, that's not gonna get built this year.
I get it. Okay. Thank you for your answer.
Okay, well, I have a couple questions. So, something that I'm noticing in here, and this goes across multiple departments, a lot of, and this may be past practice, and I get that, I think, but I'm looking at a lot of engineering expenses, you know, 50,000, 50,000, 25,000. And then another one that always sticks out to me are radios. That we bond for radios. It seems like every bonding cycle. If we know these things are coming, is there a reason that we bond for them and that we don't, as opposed to just budgeting for them in our budget? Bonding's
The
been easier?
recommendation would be to put it in the operating budget, correct? And historically, we have been bonding for it. That would just be knowing that there will be an assumption that the operating budget will go up for this equipment.
Okay,
We
and so,
certainly can make a push to put it in the 2024 budget and then see, you know, what the total request is.
yeah, and what I don't want to do though is disrupt the schedule for any projects. But of course, and that's, you know, I'm looking at you two, but there's a whole council to look at on this one. If we're going to start budgeting for those things, you got to raise the mill rate or you got to cut some expenses.
Right.
So it's, but Steve, when I'm, and Dan, I think you're in here too, when we're looking at the engineering costs associated with these, I assume these are things that you want to actually start designing this year? And are these outside agencies that are doing this?
For park-related projects, yes, it'd be outside agencies or we would contract it out. And the intent is we'll do the engineering this year, and then in next year's bond request, we would request money to actually do the improvements of what comes out of the engineering study.
Okay, same with you,
And
Steve?
Some of these are actually under contract especially if it's engineering related to a DOT-funded project. Those typically have about a 27 to 36-month lifespan. So we're budgeting that money up front so we can continue to pay that consultant over the course of the next 2 years.
Sure. And I'm just asking the question more of someone, again, something that I've observed in here every year. And radios, again, would be the other one. Like if we know we've got to replace radios every so often.
Well, historically, the way we've looked at engineering, engineering of a project, of an infrastructure project, is inherent to the life of that engineering project. So the engineering costs associated with that would be eligible for the bonded cost as opposed to a budgetary contracted services, for instance.
Yeah, and I think that's standard practice in the private
Right.
sector as well. You know, but again, what I'm trying to do is figure out how we maybe get ourselves into a position to stop bonding for so much, so that we're not millions of dollars over our bond threshold every year. And then how do we start paying for, and maybe engineering is not the easy target, right? There could be another target that's much easier. And Director Ellenbecker and I talked about this yesterday. You know, there's something in here like I think it was a brush cutter for $5,500, right? Like, is that something we need to bond for? Can we budget for that? $10,000 roof replacements, things of that nature.
Also talking about squad cars.
Yeah, squad cars are easy target too because they're rotation, but I'm even thinking about what's the threshold for which we bond versus budget.
Well, up until 5 years ago, our equipment budget, our equipment replacement for heavy equipment was part of the bond, or part of our operating budget.
Yeah, and I remember you saying that in the past.
Yeah, we moved that out about 4 or 5 years ago. Right now, that's $1.5 million worth of bonding that used to be carried as part of our operating budget.
Right. I don't think anybody's expecting us to get back there overnight, but if we don't at least talk about it every year, figure out how we're going to inch back into that direction.
And on our end with roof replacements, we do roof replacements throughout the parks on an annual basis. We never have enough money in our budget to do that. That's why those roof replacements always from year to year go on the bond request.
Well, I guess my concern is, a lot of this stuff here, like Alder Johnson's been talking about, used to be part of the budget. The squad cars, the radios, the equipment that we're looking at, floor scrubbers, what's this other one, some kind of a cleaner for the fire department. I mean, the gear washer for Station 4 and Station 6. I mean, all this stuff used to be budgeted, and is this related to Act 10? So it doesn't go back to 2010, this goes back further?
Less.
But is that because there isn't as much revenue sharing as there was before?
That definitely plays into it. There were some tough decisions that had to be made about 5 years ago, and we were looking for ways to lessen the impact on the levy to try to hold levy stable. And what the decision was made was to take certain items off the levy and put them into levy-supported borrowing, because the debt service impact against the levy, debt service didn't count towards levy limits or expenditure restraint. So by borrowing the money, even though it ultimately indirectly winds up as part of the levy, it becomes exempt from the expenditure restraint, and it helped us to meet our budget with the expenditure restraint and maintenance of levy limits.
To me, it's like getting hooked on drugs. You know, I mean, you're taking care of a problem by bonding, and you get
Correct.
deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And now the hue and cry from the constituency is, look at the amount of money that we owe. Look at our debt. Look how much money we're spending every year on debt. And again, I've said this many times before, we've painted ourselves into a corner. We can't get out of it. Like, it'd be neat if we had the money for this.
But it's not just us, Bill.
Well, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and that's the problem, all this state law, and this is why I called attention to this at the last council meeting, that we need to be paying attention to what's going on with the shared revenue legislation. Because the state law gives municipalities every incentive in the world to go into debt.
Right. Well, they force you into it.
They do.
It's either that or you have literally your streets and buildings falling apart. Driving squad cars like we were with holes in the floors. Look at the amount of equipment that you guys had that is subpar. Fire engines that are broken, cracked, and they're still being used. I mean, this is something, and I can't get why the legislature doesn't see this, or the municipalities haven't banded together to make this a point, but then we're quibbling over getting rid of a paralegal position in the law department for half the year to save a few pennies so that the taxpayers feel like they're getting a break, and it's all smoke and mirrors. If we're going to be saving that kind of money, that money should be going to offset this stuff that we're bonding for. That should be part of a yearly budget system. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but we've been, I feel like I'm on a merry-go-round. We keep going around and around, and we talk about this. We've been talking about squad cars bonding for how long? At least 3-4 years. At least we're not taking out bonds like we were at one time for them, where the cars were literally gone and we're still paying debt on them. But again, to me, it's causing the constituency to suffer more than I think they were trying to help them out in the long run. And it's not working.
The only thing I'd like to add is, I know it's hard to see on here, but over the last couple of years, we have taken some equipment off the bonding, and we have put it back in the
Right.
operating budget. We have stopped, in most cases, borrowing for support vehicles. Those are now have been leased, which now is coming out of the operating. We have body cameras we're not borrowing for anymore. I mean, that is being paid by
Right.
ARPA and budgeting.
Oh, yeah.
So we have been, and again, it's
We've
taking
taken-
a long time, and we know there was 5 out of 8 years for a period of time that we didn't raise the mill rate. It actually went down in some cases, so, and those are some of the lean years when we had to cut some things or those were some of the additional years that we had to take things out of the operating budget and move it into bonding, because that was the only way of keeping a mill rate flat.
Right, the staff has done a fantastic job. That leasing of the support vehicles was a huge savings, but that money's saved this year, and then the next year it's gone from inflation and everything else, so we're trying to keep that mill rate down. And so, I mean, every year, I feel like we have our backs to the wall trying to find some way of saving more money, bonding for less, but then when you come down to it, fire stations, roads, the police station, DPW buildings, I mean, the list goes on of these buildings that are literally starting to fall apart in some cases, or are becoming a liability because of the amount of repair that needs to be done, yet we keep pushing it down the road. I mean, thankfully, ARPA has been taking a little bit out of that, like with the Nishki Bridge coming up, because I was just waiting for the day that thing just says, screw it, I'm staying open for the next 20 years. And, we're finally getting some ARPA money for that, but we've got a long list of things, and you're right, Director.
I don't think we are, Bill.
I'm gonna have to, Jackie, the Main Street Bridge was in this, it has been pushed off again. There is no money in here to repair the bridge, and there's no ARPA money that's been allocated to the bridge.
Oh, I thought there was, I'm sorry.
No,
We're-
as
in the
things
state.
sit today, there is a provision in the governor's budget to provide dedicated funding, but that's subject to deliberation at the state legislature.
All right, I'm mistaken on that then. But anyway, it just seems like an insurmountable task to try and get this budget back where it's a very sensible budget. We're doing the best we can, but it's just frustrating.
Yeah, and Jim, for your benefit too, because like you said, it's a lot to soak in. Obviously, as you can imagine, the more you borrow, the more of your annual budget you have to allocate now towards debt service, and then you run into problems like levy limits that then restrict the amount you can raise taxes to cover those repayments. So you end up in this cycle where you can't keep your head above water. A lot of needs on here that I think are all very noble needs, but I do want to commend staff though, and because you guys trimmed, this is 16 million. Again, I keep going back to the levy supported debt, but because I feel like that's almost the more impactful amount. But but you did trim a few million off of that, right?
Correct.
And one of those was the bridge that was alluded to, but hoping that funding comes from somewhere else and we don't have a critical failure in the meantime. But that's the trouble. We're being forced to gamble. Okay, there's really only one thing on here. I wrote, there's a number of things on here that I'd like for us to get into the budgeting mode on. I brought a few of those up. Chief Davis, there's one on here, and then Director Ditch, I'm going to have you talk about a little bit too. Director Ditch, why don't you go first, because I've had this conversation for the last 2 budget cycles now, bonding cycles, and that is sticking capital improvements into facilities that we are actively trying to plan out right now. I don't know why it's taking so long to get stuff back to the Ad hoc Facilities Committee. That's been, what, 2 years now that we've been trying to work on that, so that we can understand the long-term strategy around City Hall and the police department. And I've said from the beginning that I don't want to stick any money into these facilities until we have a plan. So, Director Ditch, I see you've got roof replacement, standpipe system, storm clear water system. Can you please talk to us about those items?
Yeah, and just one other note, so we did actually have another $1 million in there, I believe, for replacing the electrical for City Hall. That was also one of the cuts that we recently did to bring the request down. In regards to the roof, this is something we've been talking about for many, many years. The roof is leaking. You go onto the 6th floor, you can see with all the renovations, there's, water stains all over. In addition, we occasionally get a significant roof leak in a utility closet that houses a lot of the IT infrastructure. And so for a while, we actually had like canopies hanging in there to collect the water so it doesn't get on the wires. So the roof is really something that we've been talking about for years that just really needs to be done soon. Over the previous few years, we did bond 2 different years to start getting a pot of money for the roof replacement, because at one time we thought it would be cheaper. And so we currently have $300,000 available to replace the roof. After talking to a consultant and engineering that out with an architectural consultant, they came back and said, no, you're going to need more money than $300,000. As it turns out, Public Works did recently engineer and put it out to bid, and the bids came back, and if we were to award the bid, the bids came in April, and we can hold the bids for 60 days, but if we were to award the bid, we're $250,000 short of what we have.
What does the $60,000 contingency mean here?
So, in essence, if you award, the bid came in at $487,635. To put a 12.8% contingency in there, that's about another $62,000. So what the contingency is after construction starts, many times you run into issues that just weren't known. And so it's always good to have a little bit of a contingency in there.
And is that built into your bonding numbers?
It is built in. So if we were to approve the $250,000, we would have roughly about a 12.8% contingency, which contingencies can range anywhere from 10% to 20 or 30%, depending on how confident you are on the engineering when it's bid out. So Public Works, they recommended a 12.8% contingency, which is roughly $62,000 in contingency would be adequate.
Okay, that's the biggest thing I wanted to know, if that was included in there. So, okay, standpipe system?
So as part of the review by Berner Schobers and Associates, as far as reviewing this facility and what the needs are, they recently did an assessment or a reassessment of the facility, and they came back with recommended long-term fixes and also things that need to be done in the immediate future. So the 2 that you see here were not originally in my bond request when we submitted it 6 months ago, but it was added to the request as immediate needs that Berner Schobers feels needs to be done right away at City Hall for health safety purposes. So one is a standpipe system, so that's a fire control system. So they have to do improvements to the standpipe so that they can, if there's ever a fire in City Hall, they can manage that. And then also the other one for storm clear water system, that's in relation to, we have a utility penthouse on the roof. There is no drainage system where the water drains off of that roof. So that's actually part of the problem of why we are getting extensive leaking up there, is all that water is just sheet draining and puddling up there. So this $40,000 would be needed in addition to the roof money to do some collection system of that water.
Okay. Thank you for clarity on those items. Chief Davis, if you could speak to the $600,000 request for locker room, showers, asbestos removal, entry system, and elevator repairs.
Sure, so the condition of our locker rooms is not good. And those are way past their useful life. This is obviously a facility that gets used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's some asbestos removal in the basement of the police facility that needs to happen. That's a health and life safety issue that we think is fairly urgent. The entry system is something that is not really effective for a police facility. We have no way of logging who comes in or out of the building. It's a cipher lock system that we have to go around every time an employee leaves the police department, retires, resigns, or whatever. We have to send somebody around to every one of those cipher locks to reprogram them and then spread the word in a way that doesn't get out publicly what the code is to our door. We've had to change that sometimes when people from the public have seen what it is because we have to punch it in. So that's really not adequate to our needs. The elevator repair was a surprise that we got over the winter. That's an ADA compliance issue. I mean, I don't have an option to not fix that. Obviously we roll the dice and hopefully we can get at least another year out of our backup generator. But the police facility is something that needs to have a 24-hour uninterrupted power supply even in an emergency.
So is that something you had in here but then was removed?
We did, yeah. That was something like I said, we rolled the dice and see if we can get another year out of that, just to try to offset this elevator problem.
Okay.
And then these other items in the next item down are things that were identified as critical issues.
Okay, I appreciate the clarity. Director Grenier, I did have one more question for you. As I went through the capital improvement plan, and the mayor kind of gave me a heads up on this yesterday too. School Place, Howard Street, Oakland Avenue, I think this is the second year in a row they're being removed from the CIP. Could you just speak to that for me, please?
Well, we need the 3 streets to go somewhat simultaneously with the design of the West Seymour Pond. They're intimately related. The pond is going to provide stormwater management for drainage from those streets, and then ultimately the water, once treated, will leave the pond and go back into the storm sewers underneath those streets. So if the pond's not ready to go, we really can't do the streets either. And the pond is currently at about 60% design. Even if the design was completed and wrapped up within the next 2 months, that doesn't leave us enough construction time in the year to bid the projects out, receive the bids, start construction, get anything meaningful done before winter is going to be here. So if the pond's not ready to go, I was comfortable removing 3 streets.
And I mean, it makes sense if it's not, obviously, it makes sense to remove it from the bond if it's not ready to go. I guess I would just take the opportunity, because obviously this is my district, to maybe impose the desire to really have this thing ready for next year.
Trust me, nobody wants it done faster than me.
Because obviously now, I'll have to talk to residents in that area and try to explain why it's being removed a second time. That's not always fun, and I know you know that. It's, okay. I only had one other question, Director Ellenbecker, and this relates back to something that you and I talked about yesterday. And I kind of had conveyed my desire to have us do bonding at the same time as the budget. And so that would conceivably mean that we would be working on the 24 bond and passing it in November at the same time. I know that's a lot of work, but I think sometimes, we're sitting here in May, and I know there's reasons contributing to this, but we're sitting here in May with a bond request for projects that staff is probably already working on, because the city can't stop. So if we were, or can we, put a contingency on this bond approval, that the 24 bond proposal would be ready at budget time? Would you have objection to that?
No, we did go through the process of looking at the full 5-year request over 2 meeting time period this past summer. And, we looked to see if there was anything that we could put in the operating budget. And then at that point, I guess the goal was then to bring it back in December and January. And for various reasons, I think end up bringing it back. So no, I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
And I know you're inching in that direction.
Yep.
I kind of just want to codify it and
Yep, with the
make it happen.
assumption that whatever is decided in end of 2023, though, the bonding would happen in '24.
Correct. Yeah, the actual
Early
pulling of the bonds.
'24, yes. We could get even the process started, but with the assumption that borrowing would happen early '24.
Yep. I just think there's so much value in us having the bond discussion and the impacts of that, obviously on our budget, be hand in hand. I think there's so much value in that. Because here, and again, I go back to things like radios and engineering, and right now, it's not even really plausible for us to have a discussion to put this into the budget. I think if you're doing these things at the same time, you can at least entertain that. Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Chief, on the locker rooms, is that the men's and women's locker rooms?
Yes.
All right. Same thing with the showers. It's cool when you can go in the shower and you have to use a vice grip that they've had to put on the handles. Turn the hot and cold water off. It's impressive.
Can't just replace a handle?
Not all the time. It's 1969 material. Tiles are gone.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh at that. It's
time. The entry system though, that's a huge security risk. We tried biometrics, and that was might have been one of the first generations. But when it was hot out, the sun overheated them and they quit working, and in the wintertime they froze and quit working. And then when you have somebody like a suspect or someone that's going to the county jail who just saw your comm for the entries in and out, and they spread it around the county jail, that's not a good thing. Or you have doors that literally freeze so that they don't lock, and you find homeless people sleeping in your lounge at 3 o'clock in the morning. These are things that give officers nightmares, because you just don't know what they're going to get into and what's going to happen. So, but it's like the roof on the City Hall. Dan's been talking about that for how many years now?
Quite a few.
And when you start seeing staff do lotteries about, they're trying to predict when the roof is going to finally cave in on everything. At some point we have to step up and do the right thing and get these things done, even though it's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're trying to keep your bonding down. But
and I'm more inclined to do something like a roof, because even if this building has a different use in the future, it needs a roof.
Right.
Right.
because I know how many times has the PD had to have it. Well, you haven't been around that long, but that seems to be like an annual thing. Like every 5 years or so, they're up there having to redo the roof because, like they said, you can see the leakage right here in these tiles, and you see a lot worse. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff you see here is stuff that has been on here again and again and again, and we keep pushing it down the road, and everyone knows that eventually the brakes are going to fail, and you just don't want that car going somewhere at a high rate of speed when it happens. So, I mean, if we lost all that electronics up on the roof here, that would set us way back even further. So, I really don't see anything that we could really say, hey, let's push this off anymore. And when you hear that staff has already pushed off quite a bit, that they were hoping to get done again this year. And I understand what you're talking about, the feasibility study with our buildings and that, because that would be nice to get a plan in place that we know throughout the city what buildings need to be done and in what order they should be done. And if we're going to sell a building, yeah, you're right, why put a ton of money into it? If we're going to get a new police station in a few years, why put a ton of money into it? But I don't see that happening on any of the fronts that we have right now, getting that kind of infrastructure or getting the money that we need to do that. So, it's patch and patch and patch and keep patching and keep hoping at some point something happens where we can get the necessary funds, the fire stations, police stations, city hall roofs, things like that. So,
Walter Hutchinson?
Yeah, I just have one question, because you always look at the biggest number on here. Of course, it's Public Works, $8 million for various pavement projects.
You're not going to take away roads, are you?
Well, I just want to cut it in half, no. Is that for construction of pavements?
Correct.
Okay, and this is really tied into if there's utility work? Or is this-
Earlier today, at Alder Johnson's request, I forwarded off to each of the Finance Committee a separate 8-page document that details the Department of Public Works capital improvement program.
Just got it.
And just for your reference, on the very back page, top middle, he summarizes what he needs for pavement, and then he has some funding sources, and then comes back to $8,185,000. So within here, all your details, I'm sorry, Steve, I cut you off, that kind of tells you all the roads. There is a city column that says that's the amount that's going to be for city, and then storm and sanitary, and that backs up and subtotals onto what our request was.
Okay. Okay, for me, there's an ARPA contribution that's blank, so that means 0?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
It's in your inbox.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. Well, today. So if you want to see this again,
So it was in
you'll have
the-
it in
It
your
just came
inbox.
about 3 o'clock, 3:30 today.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Are
So,
you going to be sending this to all the alders?
I definitely can.
I would say, I mean, especially as, you know, this thing's going to get pulled. And we'll get the pillows out and get ready for a long meeting. But this will really help, I think, hopefully explain a lot to all of us.
okay, well, I'm good getting this out of committee and just into council. To your point, Alder Galvin, it's going to get talked about, I'm sure, there as well. So I'll just make a motion just to facilitate this. I'll make a motion to approve with a contingency that the 24 bond request be presented with the November budget. Of course, they would come to committee before then, but,
I'll second that.
okay, any further discussion? Any more questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. F, informational, 23 contingency account is at $244,643.36 with an unobligated amount of $200,004.96. The next Finance Committee meeting will be held on May 23rd, 2023 at 4:30 PM. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Galvin, with the motion, Hutchinson with the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned.
Look at my mailbox, I guess.
I did.